Hello and good evening. Welcome to From Claim to Conclusion, How to Write the Argumentative Essay Workshop. My name is Professor Hannah Khan, and I am so excited to be here with you tonight to talk through this very exciting assignment that can often feel overwhelming or daunting. We are going to break down the assignment as a whole into manageable steps, into pieces that fit into a large puzzle, a beautiful mosaic, so that you can see how the flip-flop essay, the annotated bibliography, all of these things are building towards your argumentative essay, which is your ultimate project this term. So I will open us up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for the gift of writing, for the opportunity to research and to learn more about your created world and the way you ordered things to be. And I just pray, Lord, that as these students go through their research projects, that the research would be fruitful and enriching, and just the writing paper process, though at times can feel overwhelming. I pray, Lord, that there would just be that these students would have such peace throughout the whole process. And we give these things to you, Lord. Pray that you bless this conversation. In Jesus' name, amen. Welcome, Rosalind. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. I'm going to be on mute because I'm kind of moving around. I'm listening. I'm writing notes. I got to go to my mom. So I'm here.
I totally understand. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
All right. So to begin, we're going to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. What do you find to be most challenging about writing argumentative essays? So for those of you who are in LAM 101, you guys are currently in the throes of writing your argumentative essay. What have you found to be most challenging thus far?
Oh my goodness. Can I start?
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see. Finding the resources.
Mm-hmm.
And not being a writer,
Mm.
literally trying to put this stuff together. Those are the biggest challenges.
Mhm. Well, my encouragement would be you're in this class and you are a writer, so that it might not always feel like it, but you are
Oh,
one. Margie, it looked like you had something you wanted to add.
I guess my biggest challenge is I have a lot of resources. I mean, loads. I even added an extra table down here. You can't see it because of the camera, but I have like resources and articles everywhere. I guess my biggest challenge is organizing, like in what I want to say first, just the organization of it all, what paragraph should I write first? Which one of my topics should I address first?
Mhm.
And, to connect it to the next topic and then have it all go back to the thesis. It's just a lot. I guess the organization.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That's a big one, especially for a paper of this length. Dolores, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, for me it's more like Rosalind, like the research I haven't, and then Hannah, I worked with you before, but I have time constraint, so I don't have a lot of time to look for the
Mhm.
resources. And then this one had like eight.
Yes.
Like
Mhm.
I was just so Professor P that I struggled with the outline. I just completed it, and it was still a struggle for me to understand. Like, and then a lot of the verbiage too, like I have to look up the definitions before I can keep moving. So a lot of it is just that because I don't have so much time, I feel like it's more pressured and more pressed, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
Can
Totally makes sense. Thanks for
I
sharing.
add something?
Absolutely.
Oh, we just the assignment that we had to do the discussion assignment, and we had to write a paragraph and do a synthesis and use at least two sources.
Mm.
I found that when I did that and then I printed it out just for my, because I'm going to use that in my essay, it was almost the whole page. And I was like, oh my
I believe
goodness,
it.
maybe I'm
Mhm.
getting all excited for nothing because I feel like I did that in maybe like an hour, maybe two, and it was almost a whole page. So just that I'm just trying to encourage you guys that I think we get ahead of ourselves because I was like a whole page, that's almost a whole page, and really it was just a paragraph.
Yeah, it's amazing. Once you've been thinking about the topic and researching it for such a long time, once you actually let yourself begin to write, a lot of times the pages do come together, which is really encouraging. So I'm glad to hear that. Thanks. Okay, so I made this little timeline for us because I think it could be really helpful not only to see a visual, but also to recognize the progress that you've already made. So it can feel like there's still so far to go, but really you've made it so far already. So I was thinking through this kind of agricultural analogy, and thinking about how at the beginning of the term you selected a topic. And so that's like gathering your tools. And then you began to plant the seeds by selecting your sources, writing your thesis for your flip-flop essay, watering it, developing your flip-flop essay. Um, then you added more resources by selecting your argumentative essay thesis. You are in the process of completing your final argumentative essay draft. Or excuse me, sorry, I'm going out of order. The seedling is completing the annotated bibliography. And then you have your sapling of your rough draft, and then your final draft, and then you get to enjoy the satisfaction and the fruit of your hard work and labor. And so I know that right around, here and here is a lot of work, but you've already grown so much this far and you are about to be able to really enjoy the fruits of your labor. So just wanted to encourage you with that. But let's dive into the nitty-gritty of writing an argumentative essay. So as you all know, writing is an integral part of college. It's a huge part of learning and developing our understanding of these different topics and showing professors that you've developed a working knowledge of the skills and the topics that you're learning about in your courses. It's also important to note that writing doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not just you and the page, even though sometimes it can feel like that when the blank page is just staring back at you. But rest assured, it is actually a conversation. Like Margie was saying with the synthesis assignment that you recently completed, you're engaging in a scholarly conversation about a topic that has already been established and is ongoing. And you are getting to engage and step into that. I like to think of it kind of as like a large dinner party where you're sitting around the table with all these different authors who have gone before you and have written and published on this topic. And you're the host or the hostess, and you are directing the conversation between the dinner guests, excuse me. So you can talk about how Scholar A establishes this point, and then Scholar B builds on that foundation in this helpful way. And even though Scholar C disagrees, uh, he or she provides a really effective, helpful disagreement or critique or correction to scholars A and B. And so you're getting to enter into this ongoing dialogue and begin to shape and frame and contribute to it in your unique way with your unique argument about the topic. So that's really exciting. It's a really exciting prospect. Margie, yes. You're on mute at the moment.
That was great. That was great. That gave me a whole different perspective. But let me ask you this, not
Yes.
but, and are we allowed to like say, we are taking all these other different writings and we are, writing it into like this conversational, factual piece, but it's also our opinion added, correct? Do we insert like our own views on it?
So
Because
oh, go ahead.
no, because I'm thinking if we don't, then it's really not my essay, right?
So you are adding in your argument in your thesis, which is then woven and proven throughout the entirety of your
Okay.
paper. And the thesis itself is a debatable claim. So a reasonable person could disagree with the claim that you're establishing in your thesis, but that is going to be somewhat opinion based depending on your worldview, depending on your perspective, depending on so many different things that's going to shape how we view these controversial subjects that you're writing on. So I always like to say it's like a supported like you're supporting your argument with evidence when you present that in your essay. So like you're using evidence from these authors, from these scholars, these facts, statistics, your rhetoric, logos, ethos, pathos, your different appeals. But at the end of the day, it is a topic that people disagree on. And so there is going to be some opinion involved, but it should be supported.
Okay. Okay.
Also, hello, Melissa. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Hi, God bless you guys.
Yes, God bless. All right. Any other questions or comments at this point in the workshop? Okay, all right. So we just talked about how writing is a conversation, and now we're going to talk about the next point, how organization, focus, and clarity are three of the main goals and aims that we should have when we're writing. So we want our writing to be well organized. We want it to be focused on the topic, on the thesis that we've established in our introduction, and we want to be clear. So we don't need to just use a thesaurus for every word to try to find the, word with the most syllables that sounds, college level and smart. Of course, if you have a longer word that's fitting, then absolutely use it. But clarity is really, really important. And you really just want to write what you mean, express what you really mean, and of course, say it in a formal tone. We don't want to just be using like any type of slang or colloquialisms, but we really want to be clear. So we want clarity to be one of our main goals, one of our main aims. And as a reminder, as we'll talk about throughout this evening, paragraphs should explain and expound on the thesis. So the thesis really is that central foundation and roadmap to the rest of the essay. So our first steps. So you've all already selected your debatable topic, and you have researched and written the flip-flop essay. So you are very familiar at this point with the opposing argument to your actual stance. So you're aware of why critics argue the way they do, why they have presented arguments the way that they have, the reasonings that they use, the evidence that they use. So you have a really well-rounded understanding of, even though I disagree with this other side, I understand why they think the way they do, why they argue the way they do, which is going to make your argument that much stronger because you're aware of what other people think. And that's a really valuable, worthwhile endeavor to understand why other people think the way they do. So back to the thesis statement. So now for your argumentative essays and any essay that you write in college, we want to think of the thesis as the backbone of the paper. So it provides the structure, it provides the outline for the rest of the paper. It's the blueprint. It shows how all of the different pieces fit together to form a unified whole. And my personal favorite analogy is that it functions as a roadmap. So I really love this picture that I've included on this slide, thinking of the essay as a whole as a road trip. So you're traveling to these different destinations, and the thesis shows you where you're going to go. And then I like to think of each push pin as an individual point that you're going to develop through various body paragraphs. So the thesis provides the lay of the land, shows where you're going and how you're going to get there. And then throughout the road trip, you're stopping in these different destinations to zoom in and focus on those supporting points, and then travel to the next point, and then the next point. And then, of course, you've completed your journey by the time you get to the conclusion. So when it comes to writing an effective thesis statement, their effective thesis statements take on many different forms. So it's an important caveat to start out with by saying that thesis statements can take a variety of forms. It does not need to follow this formula. This structure is just helpful for some people. So it's it's an option that's available to you, but is by no means the absolute requirement. So one way you can structure your thesis statement is to begin with the counter argument, followed by your topic, your claim, and your three supporting reasons. So if your topic was on school uniforms in K to 12 schools, and perhaps your argument was that school uniforms should be a requirement, you might write your thesis statement like, although many students view the ability to choose their school clothing as a necessary personal freedom, that's the counter argument, school uniforms should be required in all public schools because doing so will reduce gang activity, alleviate students' anxiety around clothing and socioeconomic differences, and decrease instances of bullying. So you have a very clear topic and claim. So from this, the reader knows you're writing about school uniforms. They know where you stand on the subject, that school uniforms should be required in all public schools. And the reader also has your three specific pieces of reasoning that you will develop into multiple body paragraphs throughout the entirety of the paper. So that is just one possible structure that you can use. Any questions about that structure before we move on? And then a few other options, again, if your position was that actions need to be taken about internet use to maintain a balance because many people are addicted to their devices, phones, social media, you might write, while some argue that daily technology use has little effect on well-being, that's the counter argument, research shows that physical, mental, and social repercussions are undeniable and drastic actions need to be taken to help young people find balance. Another example would be if you wanted to talk about fast food and how fast food causes health issues. This writer didn't include the counter argument here. She just went right into the main claim. Oh, Dolores asked a great question. Can we have access to this PowerPoint? So this workshop is being recorded, and so I will post the recording on our Ally Center YouTube page, and I can send you the recording so that you can pause, rewind, fast forward, and you can rewatch it as you'd like.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So for the second example, this writer wrote, consuming fast food regularly leads to heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, and there are lifestyle solutions to prevent these health issues. And then finally, if a student were to write on global warming and his or her stance was there are many things we can do to slow global warming, that writer could write global warming is a real threat to the world. As human beings, we can slow climate change by carpooling, using less energy at home, and eating a mostly plant-based diet. So that would be, those 3 points would be the points that the writer would develop and expound on in the essay. So that is kind of a quick crash course on thesis statements. And now we are going to just continue to talk about a few things with the thesis statement, and then we'll get into some other essay considerations with the argumentative essay. So as a reminder, the thesis statement is an argumentative claim, and it takes a debatable stand on an issue. It's not a description, a summary, or just a statement of the topic. So we don't want to just have a statement of fact because people aren't really going to disagree with facts. It should be something that has a level of interpretation to it. It can and should be revised as you further refine your evidence and arguments. So I'm sure many of you have found this throughout the process that as you research, as you write, as you draft, you may have changed your thesis statement slightly or drastically depending on the evidence that you found in your process, because new evidence often requires you to change your thesis statement. And that's a good thing. That's part of the process. And of course, our thesis statements give our papers a unified structure and point. It provides direction, substance, structure, all of the essential things. So to recap, in your thesis statement, you present an argument, a stance, and a claim. You want to ask yourself, can my audience, can my readers argue with what I've presented in my thesis statement? It also provides a key to the organization of the paper. Can I construct body paragraphs that support it? And that's a really important question to ask because we want to be able to realistically develop our paper from our thesis statement. And we want to place our thesis at the end of the introduction, so it's really clear what our argument is and that our reader knows going into the paper what it is we'll be arguing. And we also want to present an argument that can be supported by reputable research. So is our argument logical? Is there evidence to back it up and support the claims that we're establishing? So moving from the thesis statement into the annotated bibliography, I know many of you have been working on this recently. I like to break down the annotated bibliography because the assignment itself, the name is quite lengthy. So let's break it down. What does annotation mean? It's really just a fancy academic word for notes. And what is a bibliography? It's a works cited or a references page. So when we put those together, an annotated bibliography is a works cited page with notes underneath each citation. So this is, of course, typically assigned in preparation for a final paper, like you have in LAM 101. And what I really try to emphasize to students is that it can feel like the annotated bibliography is just like one more thing to do. Like, why do I have to do this? But it's really a useful tool that's going to help you when you go to actually draft the paper. So it enables you to organize your research and then plan accordingly for how those sources are going to fit into the larger scope of your paper. Because it can be really easy as you're going through the research process to read great facts and statistics and quotes and be like, oh, that's going to be so helpful. And like, yes, I'm so excited. And then when you actually sit down to write the paper, it's like, wait, where was that quote? Which author made that point? I know I read that somewhere, but where did I find it? The annotated bibliography hopefully prevents some of that or all of that headache where you have your research organized and you have it prepared so you know exactly how you want to use it and plug it into your essay. Margie.
So does your annotated bibliography have to have all your resources at the when it's all said and done?
So for LAM 101, it has to have the 8 required sources.
Right.
But if you're using 10, 12, 13 sources, you do not need to include every single source. You just need to meet the requirements for those 8 sources that are outlined in the assignment description.
Well, we already handed in an annotated bibliography, and I noticed for this week it says hand in final annotated bibliography. So do we tweak it, or I thought mine was done? I'm not like I spent a lot of time on that.
Sure. So you'd
I'm
want to
not.
revise it based on any feedback you get from your professor. Well, thank you guys for sharing. So with that, I would then just recommend that you guys just go through and double check that you do have like the number of, the print or ebook, the number of peer-reviewed sources. And if you have any questions about, what sources are what, feel free to reach out to me. Like if you want to send me a quick email and like send me your sources and I can just take a look at them, or we can schedule an appointment and check them out that way. But I'd be happy to help you in
Right now.
whatever way I
Oh,
can.
and the other thing, Hannah, if you're doing the study on Wednesday,
Yes, the study group. Yep,
yeah, maybe that's something, that we can discuss during that
absolutely.
time. Because I
Yes.
think one of the things that I'm having to deal with, of course, we all dealing with our life and time.
Mhm.
And with all of the sources that we have, one of them, and I think I've added 2 on my annotated bibliography, 2 books. And it's like, now we're clearly not expected to read through whole books. And,
Correct.
how do you get through all of it?
Sure.
And I think that was one of the
Mhm.
questions that I asked Professor B today. How do we
Mhm.
get through to the nitty gritty of our material with having
Mhm.
so much
Yes.
material?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So with a book or an ebook, my recommendation is to find an individual chapter that you find really helpful for your topic. And
Okay.
so you can do that through a variety of ways. With the ebooks, you can actually like do a keyword search.
Okay.
Another thing is if you have the print book, you can actually
Yes.
flip to the back, and a lot of print books or a lot of more like scholarly or academic print books will have an index.
Okay.
And so then you can like find keywords related to your topic and see, okay, my topic is addressed on page 75 and 105 and 110. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
look at those pages and see if that chapter, that those pages are helpful to my paper. But you're absolutely right. You're not expected to read, you know, 300-page book just for this one essay in addition to the other sources that you're reading.
Right.
So, uh,
Okay. Okay.
and then
Because I think
for,
one of the
yeah,
things I asked her was, I mean, is there a class on speed reading or something that I need to
yes,
take?
yes, yeah. And we actually, so through the Ally Center Library Guide, we actually do have some resources about like reading strategies and tactics
Mm.
for previewing and going through and looking at the introduction and the conclusion and the headings and kind of like priming your brain for, okay, this is the information that I'm about to learn, reading through, taking
Okay.
notes. So at the end, we can actually pull up those resources and I can show you where
Okay.
to find those in the library
Perfect.
guide. Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Okay.
Okay. Yes. All right. Any other questions or comments at this time? Oh, Dolores, you have your hand raised. Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that obviously I'm in the same class with these guys, so I'm in the same boat. But what I in our Zoom meeting yesterday, she did say that some of the stuff she's just grading that it's done. Because I was stressed because I literally just handed in my annotated bibliography. I had no time, so she gave me grace and said that the school gives us time, so it made me feel better.
Mhm.
Um, and just honestly, I know that I missed a couple things too, but it's just the point that I think that we're gonna get grace in all that we do to get it right. And I know I'm that person too. I want to make sure I get it right from the beginning. But and in reading all the paperwork, I get it. Trust me. So what I do is I and I've said this before, I skim through it. And I
Mhm.
try to find exactly what I need for what I'm looking for because, like she said, we can't read that all.
Mhm.
And to find a hard book, it was hard for me. So I actually had someone from the college. I looked for something, they didn't have what I had. She literally made me screenshots and emailed it to me. So
Wow.
the
Yeah.
library is a really big
Mhm.
source and they help you
Yep.
out as much as they can. So that was a blessing in itself.
Yeah, they do.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Our librarians are wonderful. And you can reach out to them via email. You can schedule research appointments. They're awesome. Okay. So, we'll just kind of quickly breeze through this. So the annotated bibliography, as you know, requires you to collect a certain number of sources of particular types, and we want to be using scholarly sources from academic publications and sources that are published by researchers, experts, scholars in the field, and we can assess our sources' credibility through. There's actually a resource. Speaking of our LibGuide, there is a resource here about evaluating the currency, the relevance, the authority, the accuracy, and the purpose. And you can score your sources like based on these different questions and the number of points that they score for each category, which will give you a pretty good idea of the credibility of that source.
I sent you a copy of my annotated bibliography.
Oh, okay. Thanks for doing that. I'll take a look at it.
Okay, we'll see you tomorrow about that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so share this again. My Zoom videos keep on going like behind the PowerPoint, so I'm like trying to see you guys, but then also see my slides. So my apologies. Get this figured out. Here we go. All right. So, as you know, you have 8 required sources for your essay, the Bible, 1 credible print book or ebook, 3 academic peer-reviewed journal articles, and 3 credible sources of your choice, which is really nice having that flexibility if you want to include like a podcast episode from a reputable source or other articles. a sermon that, from a well-known trusted pastor on YouTube, you have these options to implement those other types of sources into your paper as well. So we are going to jump into talking about the stages of the writing process. So everyone's writing process looks a little bit different, but generally we want to have some sort of stage in which we're planning, organizing, drafting, revising, and editing. And we are going to jump into the specifics of those during our time together tonight. So before we jump into the planning stage, we also want to just review, okay, what kind of writing style is acceptable when it comes to our argumentative essays? So as a friendly reminder, because this is a college level essay, it's not a reflection, we're going to avoid the use of personal pronouns. So we're not going to say like I, me, my, and we also don't really want to address the reader directly by saying like you might think, or because we don't want to be like jumping at the reader. So we want to keep it in an objective third person, people or one or humanity. We also want to, as we talked about earlier, make clarity our primary goal. And then we also want to use proper spelling, grammar, and punctuation. So that's kind of the foundation. So when it comes to the argumentative essay itself, we of course want to present and defend a claim with support as presented in our thesis statement. So we want to make sure that the content of our essay, the development of our essay, is focused on what we set out to prove in our thesis statement. So we could have a great thesis statement and then a really interesting paper, but if that paper isn't really focused on proving and developing the thesis statement, then we're going to have issues. So we want to make sure that we are really focused on developing the thesis throughout the paper. So we also want to keep a careful record of our sources. We talked about this, of course, with the annotated bibliography, but as always, we want to make sure that any outside information, whether it's quoted, paraphrased, or summarized, must be cited properly. So we want to make sure that whenever we're drawing on any ideas, whether it's a direct quote, a summary, or a paraphrase, it should be cited properly with an MLA cited style citation. And we can use the citation feature in the library. So I'm sure many of you are aware in the LBC library, you can actually find a source citation and it can give you the MLA citation. Of course, we always want to double check because even computers make mistakes, but it can provide a really nice foundation to have that initial citation to go on your works cited page. So we're looking at sources on the fruits of the spirit. You might look through, do some research. You might find a source that we want to use. So this source is from 2011, but we'll pretend it's from 2021 for the purposes of staying relevant and current in our research. But if we click on this citation button, we can go down to MLA, and then we can actually copy and paste this citation onto our works cited page. And of course, we want to make sure that it's size 12 Times New Roman, double space, black ink, but it provides a really nice foundation for that citation so that you don't have to go through and gather all of that information yourself. It saves some time. Rosalind, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question with regards to citing of course, the quotes,
Yes.
direct quotes. I got that clear, but I got feedback on something that I had paraphrased, and I put the paraphrase in quotes, and that was not correct. So, of course, okay, when you're doing a direct quote,
Mhm.
and at the end of the statement, you do the whatever's in parentheses, I guess the name, last name, and
Mhm.
the page number or whatever. But
Mhm.
and maybe I missed it on the assignment we did for the paraphrase.
Mhm.
And so, what do we do with the paraphrase?
Great, excellent question. So when it comes to paraphrasing or summarizing, so if
Yes.
you're paraphrasing someone or just summarizing their overall argument, you're still drawing on their thoughts, their ideas, and so you're still going to include a parenthetical in-text citation at the end of that sentence. You just
Okay.
won't include direct quotes because it's not word for word, but you
Okay.
still might
Okay.
say author Jane Doe argues such and such and such and such, and you're putting it in your own words, but you're drawing from Jane Doe's book or chapter or article.
Uh-huh.
And so you're giving credit where credit is due, and then you still have that parenthetical citation at the end to note, well, if you already put her name in the sentence, then you can just put the page number in the parenthetical citation.
Okay.
But then if her name is not in the sentence, of course, you would put her last name and the page number in
Okay.
the in-text citation.
What
Okay.
if there's no page
Awesome.
number?
If there's no page number, then you would just cite the author. So the author's last name would need to be somewhere in the sentence, whether that's in the parenthetical citation or you say author Jane Doe, argues, asserts, critiques. And
But
then you
not
have
both.
You wouldn't need both because you've already cited the author in the content of the sentence.
But what if you end a sentence and then you continue on in your paraphrasing? So then you should cite
Mm.
something at the end, correct?
Correct. Yes. So if you
Okay.
kind of begin in one sentence and you cite the author, but then you're continuing to draw on his or her ideas or summarize or paraphrase, you would then need another in-text citation to note that you're still drawing on his or her ideas.
Now, is that after your entire paraphrase or summary? Like you don't have to cite at the end of each sentence, correct?
You just want to make it clear in any sentence that you've included information that is not your own. You want to make it really crystal clear that you're drawing on his or her ideas. So, I mean, say you have Jane Doe argue such and such and such and such in the first sentence, and then she continues by da 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 da. Then you're still noting, okay, who is the she in that sentence? It's referring to author Jane Doe. You just want to make it really crystal clear that you're citing the information and then what source that information came from.
Okay. I think I was under the assumption that uh, if you have the author and the title in the first sentence and then you start your paraphrase, which I just did on my, I'll have to go back and look at that. And then I wrote a couple sentences. It all went together. And then I just cited it I cited the author at the end of the paraphrases. Probably was like three sentences, but they
So
were all
when you
connected. Like you could follow
Okay.
the flow was together.
Okay. So then in that case, if credit is given where credit is due, then that is what's most important.
I hope.
Yes, as long as it's totally clear who's the author, who you're getting it from, where that source is, and then that in-text citation corresponds to a works cited page entry, that is what's most important.
And can I ask one more question?
Sure,
And this is kind
absolutely.
of little off subject for this, but it's for all of our benefits.
Mhm.
So when you're doing a discussion post and you have to cite your sources,
Mhm.
how do you do that in Canvas? Like how do
Mhm.
you do your spaces and your
Yeah.
hanging indents?
Excellent question. So most times, now you always want to double check with your professor for each individual class to see what his or her expectations are. Most professors, like in the discussion post, will, supply the reading or the video or the book or whatever chapter from your textbook, a lot of times in discussion posts specifically, you may only need the in-text citation. Because it's not a whole separate essay, a lot of times you may only need that in-text citation to note where you're summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. But a lot of professors won't necessarily require that works cited page entry. Some will. So you just want to make sure to double check with your professors to be crystal clear on the expectations. But if you're all citing from the same chapter in your textbook, and again, it's a discussion post, I would just double check with your professor about the specific expectations for that. But a lot of times just an in-text citation will suffice.
I tried to copy and paste it, but of course it doesn't come out the same. But what I did is I just manually like added spaces for the hanging indent because I couldn't get it to do anything else. And I was like frustrated after 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I just thought maybe
No, don't
there
apologize.
was
It's a
like
great question.
a miracle cure for that.
Yeah, and sometimes even, you might get the spacing to look right, but then once you actually post it, sometimes the spacing will shift. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I understand.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to jump back to the stages of the writing process just because I thought I had additional slides about that, but that was from a different workshop that I did. So I just want to jump in. So you, of course, at this point in your writing process have already done a lot of planning, a lot of organizing and drafting. I really kind of want to focus on the latter half of the writing process here, the drafting, revising, and editing. So who can tell me what is the difference between revising and editing? Does anyone know the difference between revising and editing a paper or just a piece of writing?
I want to say revising is just fixing something that's already like to the point that it's good. And editing, you're actually going and taking things out, putting things in, taking things out, putting things in. Like correcting things out should not be there, moving it around.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's it. That's pretty close. So revision is focusing on the content. So that's where you're really focusing on, okay, did I argue everything I wanted to say? Did I include all the research I needed to include? Are there any paragraphs that need to be moved around or shifted? Or, am I missing a paragraph? Like, is there a point that's missing from my argument? Does my argument have a hole in it? Whereas editing, it are those nitty-gritty grammar, syntax, spelling, punctuation, those sorts of corrections that we want to make, of course, at the final stage when all of our content and paragraphs are in order and in place. So nice. Yes. So I just wanted to highlight that to encourage you guys to just really focus on, as you're going through these final stages of the writing process, to focus on revising that content before worrying too much about the final polishing, because that will come, but really focusing on, okay, is all of my content here? Do I have my counter arguments, refutations, rebuttals, my biblical worldview? Okay, I have all that in place. Now I'm going to go through and edit and polish. Because it can be
I knew
really,
I read that.
yes, yeah.
It was on our assignment today. I knew I read that. It's 274 and 275, and it gives you
Oh,
all the
great.
questions to ask
Oh,
in
excellent.
our book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Revising your essay, it says. That's
Yes.
awesome. I read that today, and then when you asked the question, I couldn't even think.
Mhm. It's late. I understand. Yes. So revising, really focusing on the content and then editing, that final polishing. It can be kind of tempting to be like, oh, this isn't, you know, exactly how I want it to be, but that editing, that final editing polishing stage will come and you'll be able to fully kind of refine and not gloss over, polish, I guess is probably the best word, polish everything so that it's in its final state as you want it to be when you go to submit it. Okay, so we talked through these things. Okay, another encouragement that I have for you all is that in this essay, your voice as the writer should be the primary voice in the paper. It can be really tempting to feel like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I have all of the, I want like the experts to be driving my paper, but really your professor is looking for your voice as the author to be the one shaping the argument, directing it, and then you're using those outside sources and evidence as support for what it is you're saying and you're establishing in your thesis, in your topic sentences, in your the way you transition between points and between sources and explain the significance of sources. You're the one really doing all of that connecting and synthesizing, as we talked about earlier. So we just want to remember that your voice should really be the most prominent in the paper. I think Professor B usually says like less than 10% of quoted material or only 10%, I believe. Is that what she says?
Mhm.
So yeah, just keeping that rule in mind as you go through and develop so that your voice as the writer is the most prominent in the paper. Because this is your opportunity to really apply the skills that you've acquired throughout this course and throughout your education up until this point, and to show what you've learned in terms of rhetoric and argumentation and composition and citation and all of the exciting things that you've learned about. So now we're going to talk about counter arguments, refutations, and rebuttals. So this is an important part of your LEN 101 class because you're learning about rhetoric and argumentation. And so in the flip-flop essay, you had to include a counter argument, refutation, and rebuttal. And now in the argumentative essay, you'll include at least two. So you'll have at least two counter arguments, then two refutations and two rebuttals. Related to those, counterargument, refutation, rebuttal, counterargument, refutation, rebuttal. And because you've already written your flip-flop essay, your counterargument really should be largely already formulated because you've had to articulate that in your flip-flop essay. So of course you'll change some of the verbiage and language, but you've largely done a lot of the legwork for that for this section of the paper. Does anyone have any questions about the counter arguments, refutations, and rebuttals? I know this can be a little bit of a trickier part in terms of composing the essay.
For me, that's what I struggled with too, because I had to literally look up the definition of what's the difference between a counter argument and a refutation, because in my head it sounds the same. And I'm honestly, that's one of the things I'm hoping I did right, because I'm not 100% sure either.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So when we think about a counter argument, that is what the opposing side believes. So critics assert that, and then like some sort of counter argument to the position that you're taking. So you're establishing what other people believe, others say this, those who disagree assert that, da 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 da. You're establishing with, you're wanting to represent what the other side believes in an authentic, genuine, and honest way. Of course, we don't want to commit any logical fallacies and construct any straw men. We don't want to like construct the counter argument in a way that's not really sincere to what the other people believe. You want to establish, okay, critics assert this or others believe this, and you want to show why they believe that. So what is the support that they draw on? So you'll briefly note that. And then the refutation is where you refute their argument. So what is incorrect about their argument? Maybe they have the right intention, but their conclusion is incorrect. Or maybe they're operating on a faulty premise. Maybe they are drawing, maybe they have an entirely different worldview. Whatever it is, you're going to want to note what is incorrect about that argument. And then the rebuttal is your opportunity to reassert your claim. So you've established, okay, this is what others believe. This is why they believe it. This is why it's incorrect. And then the rebuttal is, this is why my argument is ultimately correct. Of course, you're not going to use the personal pronoun my, but you're going to ultimately reassert your claim of, therefore, and then you'll return to your argument of why what you're arguing is ultimately the best option or the best solution, depending on the topic. Any other questions about this
Sorry.
section? Oh, go ahead.
So with our flip-flop portion of it, right? Does that have to go so say I'm doing my introduction, I have my thesis,
Mhm.
I have my points, bang, 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 one, two, three. Can I do point one, point two, argument, point three, and then conclusion, refutation and conclusion? Can I do it like that?
Like put your first counter argument earlier in the paper and then like your second counter argument later. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you might have like a few body paragraphs, counter argument, refutation, rebuttal section, a few more body paragraphs, and then your counter argument, refutation, and rebuttal. That's the way a lot of people end up doing it because you're interspersing it with, you know, you're arguing, point A, point B. You're showing, okay, critics disagree with point B because, but ultimately point B is correct because, da, 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 and then, so yeah, whatever order makes the most sense for your specific topic and
Mhm.
argumentation, that is totally fine.
Because like I just did like the classical form, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but I know in that form they have like intro, thesis, one, two, three, and
Mm-hmm.
then your argument, your flip-flop, and
Mm-hmm.
then it has like the conclusion. But I think my paper just sounds better
Mm-hmm.
with like point one, point two, then the flip-flop, and then another point to why I'm correct, and then
Right.
like the refutation and the conclusion like that. So yeah, I think just because everything that's going on and the feedback was I didn't get feedback yet. I'm just gonna do the best with what I got.
Yep, absolutely. Yes.
And
Mhm. Yes, and and as I said before, that order it is flexible. So as long as you have all of the required components, how you choose to arrange it is part of the nice flexibility and freedom of this, depending on your topic, depending on what works best. That is totally up to you. Margie, did you have a question?
Yes. So can you add your counter argument, refutation and rebuttal within your paragraph? Like blah blah blah,
Mhm.
my view, this, my sources. Yet or others will argue and add that into your paragraph because it would, I mean, it wouldn't, it kind of is the same thing going on. So would you really start a new paragraph? Can you add it to a paragraph, like at the end of a paragraph?
So that's a great question. So you could technically do that. I will say you may run into length issues, like where the paragraph starts to get too long. Like if you've already spent some of the paragraph establishing your point, but if it works, where you're establishing your point and then you say, critics object on the grounds of this, this, and this. They believe this because da 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 da. However, this is flawed for such and such reasons, and then you ultimately reassert your argument, that's totally fine too. You just don't want your paragraph to get like super, super lengthy.
Right, right. Because I'm finding, like Melissa said, I think it just is not connected when you're just adding them
Mm.
counter arguments. And when you're like, say, I'm talking about the unhealthy lifestyle of the LGBTQ community, and then I talk about the mental and, maybe the God's design. I don't want to do a counter argument 4 paragraphs down that
Mhm.
refers back to the second paragraph. You know what I mean?
Sure, sure. Yeah, you should definitely keep those connected if they're
Okay,
related points.
gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Any other question about this section or the requirements regarding these pieces? So Another required component of this paper is incorporating a biblical worldview. So a lot of students will choose to put this paragraph before the conclusion. So after they've presented their argument, the support, counter arguments, and all of that, then they'll before the conclusion begin to wrap up the essay to thinking through, okay, as believers, how should Christians be thinking through this issue? What does the Bible have to say about this topic directly? Or how do we filter this topic through the lens of a biblical worldview? I always like to think of it like a pair of glasses. So if you're writing about, how should Christians think about AI? Well, AI is not in scripture directly, but we can use what the Bible has to say about wisdom and the imago Dei, being made in the image of God. What does it mean that we as people are made in the image of God with unique, creative, problem-solving capacities and, the ability to love and serve and give, all of these things? What does that have to do with when we're thinking about the rapidly advancing technology around us? So how does scripture address it, or how can we use scriptural principles and scriptural truths to filter this topic through that lens? Any questions about the biblical worldview section or that requirement? Okay.
Was that supposed to just be a separate um like point?
So depending on your topic, you might have a biblical worldview throughout, like,
Okay.
the entire, interspersed throughout the entirety of your paper. Um, but you should, even if
Reiterate it.
you're, thinking about like a biblical topic, like it is helpful. Oh, if I remember correctly, Melissa, you're writing about women in leadership. So
Hmm.
you're in
Yeah.
you're looking at scripture throughout the paper, then your biblical worldview is being
Instilled in the old.
integrated
Okay.
throughout the entirety of the paper.
Because
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, I kind of integrated that through everything,
Right,
but I
right,
did
right.
not just make like a specific point, like biblical
Right,
point. I kind
right.
of, what people were saying, what uh the sources said,
Mhm.
just like piggybacking off, kind of everything, because she was real specific that we shouldn't use our opinion. And
Right,
so,
right.
I kind of just been doing a lot of paraphrasing, a lot of reframing, a lot of, taking exactly what they said, but putting it
Mhm.
in like to my own words
Mhm.
and quoting, like just quoting what they said, but kind of in my own words, but exactly what they said, not my
Mhm.
opinion, if that makes sense.
So, like, using the author, like paraphrasing the author as support,
Yeah.
but you agree with what the author is saying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in like three of my sources that I used for a flip-flop,
Mhm.
the points could be used for my argument also.
Oh,
So,
okay.
like I pulled out stuff that, maybe somebody stated in the
Mhm.
source that wasn't like the author, like the author stated Susan Stanley said
Okay. Mhm.
something. And so I just put like as stated by Stanley,
Yes.
like that. So just, trying not just talking from like myself, like in third person, but
Mhm.
using the sources that I have, if I'm
Yes.
saying that right.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It made
Absolutely.
sense when I was doing it.
Good.
So,
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. As
so
long as your sources are cited properly and
okay.
you're supporting your thesis throughout, and then of course, giving your topic, yeah, you're incorporating a biblical worldview throughout your paper. So that is excellent. Any other questions about this requirement, this section? Okay. All right. Well, as we begin to wrap up, when in doubt, it's always good to double check the syllabus, double check assignment descriptions on Canvas, because then you can just kind of double check to make sure, you're at the required 8 to 10 pages. All of those details and things are coming together. I'd also encourage you to reach out for help as soon as you have questions, which you guys are doing, you have done, you're here now, and that's awesome. So remember that you have a network of support here to support you in your academic journey through your professor, through the Ally Center, and of course, we have our writing services, our academic mentoring services for time management and study skills, and then we also have ESL services and accessibility services as well. Okay, so moving forward, I'd love to just hear what is one idea you learned tonight that we discussed that you plan to use when writing or revising your argumentative essay, or just one writing principle that you'd like to use and implement in this course or courses to come.
I think for me, what Melissa suggested with the counter and the counter argumentative and the refuting, like to mix it in between, that made a lot more sense in the flow than adding your opinion and well, whatever you're adding and then putting it at the end.
Yes. Yeah, great. Oh, I'm so glad that that was freeing for you. Wonderful.
I think that I'm going to revise my thesis statement to make it a little bit stronger with all the information that you gave us. I'm already like writing notes down where it could be a lot stronger. I didn't know that we could revise that. I thought that, I guess what I'm kind of having a hard time is like not knowing if some things that we have handed in, if we have to use it the way we already wrote it down, or if we can revise it, which obviously we can revise it. So that makes a lot more sense to me now.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, those are checkpoints to check in, make sure you're making progress on these assignments, and then for your professor to also engage with what you're writing about. Of course, if you were going to like, which I don't think that you are, if you're going to like totally change your topic or something, then that would be a larger conversation you'd want to have with your professor.
Mhm.
But if you're just changing up your thesis, then yeah,
No,
absolutely.
it's just going to be a little bit stronger with
Mhm.
just adding something to it, just a few words.
Yeah, excellent.
That helps it make a lot more, I don't know, it just seems to me will be stronger.
Wonderful.
I think for me, um, it's everything has been so helpful. Like Marty said about the thesis, now I think I'll expand it a little more so that I have clear points
Mhm.
as to how the body will flow.
Mhm.
I also um, liked how the tone. I'm still having maybe some issues with the person to use. You know what I mean? And learning how to write in that way.
In the sense of engaging with like other authors and other viewpoints in writing.
No, in the point of not using first person.
Oh, yes, yes, yes,
And
yeah.
because as you're writing, it's like you have to learn how to say it in a way
Yes.
that's not your opinion, but
Mhm.
it is your opinion. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And
Yes,
not pointing the
absolutely.
finger and
Yeah, yeah.
just that you've given a lot of different tips on even
Mhm.
how to
Yes.
start a sentence.
Oh, wonderful.
So that, I wrote some of that stuff down. And like I said, everything's been so helpful.
I'm so glad to
So
hear that. Thanks
yeah,
for sharing.
yeah.
Wonderful. Any other takeaways?
So with me, what I've learned too is like because I think in Land 100, we were told like your thesis is solid, you can't change it, like
Okay.
and now in 101 it was different. So like I had a thesis statement, but I too expanded, but I didn't only use it there, I used it at the end also, but I reworded like
Mhm.
my thesis and ended with it. I started with it, but I ended with it also to
Yeah.
like make that point even stronger. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Of what I had like 3 points in my thesis.
Mhm.
And so learning to like do that and piggyback off of that, making them my main 3 points, but
Mhm.
then closing the argument with thesis statement, but it was just reframed in other words. Like it wasn't
Yep.
verbatim
Yep.
what I said in the beginning, but I was like, it was like a hook, like a closing hook, like a punch.
Yes.
So that's, and I was like, yay.
Excellent. Yes.
The exclamation point.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
my argument. You wrote your argument already? I'm like jealous.
Yeah. Well,
I have it
like
on here and it's like,
I was
oh,
really struggling and I was very overwhelmed and nervous. And I have put like a lot of extra effort. And I'm like, yeah, I need to get this out so that I could tweak and I could, yeah, erase. And I have like a
Awesome.
packet of printed out stuff like that I've been using for the last
yeah.
couple weeks. So I was really overwhelmed with it. So I just wanted to make sure I understood everything all around before I finalized it. Yeah.
Good for
That's
you.
awesome.
Do you have another class? Are you taking 2 classes?
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
in a
good for you.
psychology class and a writing class right now.
Great.
And in my psychology class, I'm writing a 5 to 7 page disorder diagnosis and treatment plan. So yeah, so I'm a lot of writing right now.
You're a reader.
Yep, it's that time. It's that time of the term. There's
Good.
a lot of writing going on. Well, thank you all so much for sharing all
Thank
of those
you. Thank you.
insights and things. It's been lovely meeting with you all tonight and just getting to just continue to bounce ideas off each other. And thank you for all the questions and insights that you shared. It's been just a really productive, wonderful workshop. So
Yes.
thank you all for joining, and feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that I can do to help you moving forward or this week. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your evening. And I will stop the recording.
Thank
I'll
you.
stay on for a few minutes if anyone has any additional questions that they'd like to ask. But thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you,
Yes,
Hannah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Yes, have a great rest of your
See
evening.
you tomorrow.
Yes,
God
see you
bless
at
you
study group.
guys.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.